Hello and welcome back. You're watching Showdown. Thanks very much for your company. I haven't got time to go into a rant all on my own. I'll do that regularly while talking to the panel. We're going to start by looking at what is more depressing, the state of Australian politics or the state of politics in the United States. That's where we're going to start. Let me introduce and work our way through our panel. We'll start in Melbourne if we can, from the Institute of Public Affairs, James Patterson. James, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Peter.
Hope you don't feel too left out over there all on your lonesome. We'll try and keep you included as we go through things. We're also joined from Essential Media by Jackie Woods. Thanks for your company as well.
Hi, Peter.
From the Australian newspaper, Nick Cater and Troy Bramston. Are you from the Australian or Sky? Still deciding?
A bit of both, I think.
All right. And Adam Lockyer, Dr. Adam Lockyer, no less. That was on the rundown. Now, was that at your insistence or was that my producer that put that in?
My insistence, absolutely.
Your insistence,
yeah.
All right. From the US Studies Centre at Sydney University. Thanks for your company. Now, let's start with you before we go out to sort of random thoughts on US politics from non-experts. We'll start with you. Now, what's going on? We're in a situation where there's a real standoff there. What's the likely outcome of it in terms of the Congress? Okay,
so we've already passed the sequester. That means that there's going to be automatic spending cuts this year to the tune of about $85 billion. And unless they get their act together, that's going to be spread over 10 years and go out to $1.2 trillion.
Isn't that a good thing, though? I mean, their economy is in need of these cuts. Everyone tells us it's a bad thing, but I look at the size of their deficit and I think that they need this.
Sure, but it's not using a scalpel, it's using a sledgehammer. So they're just going to cut blindly across all different portfolios without really discerning what can be cut, what can't be cut. And so things like defence are going to take a disproportional amount of cut. So things are off the table. So Medicare only takes a slight cut of about 2%. Mediaid is completely untouched. Whereas things like defence take a pretty hefty cut.
So would it be fair to say that all sides largely agree that this has to be adjusted? The issue is where the adjustments are made.
Oh, pretty much. So how this happened was this was supposed to be too stupid to happen. That what happened with the debt ceiling last year was that Obama, at his insistence, said what we're going to do is I'm going to set a ticking time bomb underneath both the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm going to hurt you both equally hard. So defence is going to take 50% cut and all other discretionary spending is going to take 50% as well. That's designed to hurt the Democrats. Now, this is never going to happen, and so you guys are going to short your stuff out. They didn't, and so that's where we've ended up.
Troy Bramston, you don't know much about US politics, but what's your view on this?
Well, I think this is another example of the US being simply a band-aid political system where, you know, the Congress is perpetually in gridlock. They're unable to make these big legislative decisions that they need to make. The President is also hamstrung because he doesn't have the authority that he needs or the numbers in terms of congressional majority in the House to get these things happening. So it's a perpetual gridlock situation that Americans have been living with now for many decades. And really the answer is really that old-fashioned horse trading and presidential leadership, where you want someone who can come in, you know, basically crack heads together like they did in the old days. You know, where,
yeah, all right, but you talk horse trading. James Patterson, let me come to you. Now, you're aligned to a free market think tank. You wouldn't be all that fanatical about the idea of horse trading if it's at the compromise of good policy in your ideological view, would you?
Well, I think it's worth putting in perspective what the size of these cuts are relative to the entire US federal budget. The Congressional Budget Office says that the actual reduction in federal outlays this year will only be $44 billion. The US government spends $3.5 trillion every single year, and its deficit every single year is $845 trillion. So this will only reduce the deficit from $845 billion to $801 billion a year. It is an absolute drop in the bucket.
So you don't think
federal spending will return to increases.
Well, let me just jump in then. So you don't think it's the sledgehammer that Dr. Lockyer here is implying?
I think Dr. Lockyer is right when he says that it's an imprecise, blunt tool, but it's certainly not a radical one. A $45 billion cut out of a $3.5 trillion budget is just a drop in the ocean. Let's bear in mind the US government has more than $16 trillion of debt. A $45 billion cut doesn't even come close to addressing the colossal debt problem they have.
Adam, how do you respond to that? James has clearly been on Google. He knows a bit about this. What's your view?
It depends who you are. So some agencies are going to take a disproportional amount of cut. And some agencies aren't as flexible to be able to absorb those sort of cuts. So here's some doomsday predictions that there's going to be these massive lines at all these airports. You're going to have national parks closed down. You're going to have all these defence personnel or being sent off onto involuntary leave for months on end. Now, some of that is true and some of it's not true. Some of it really depends upon which agencies are able to respond more flexibly to the cuts. So things like defence, at the moment, it looks likely that in a month's time, a lot of civilian personnel are going to have to go on leave. Now, if Congress, over the meantime, is able to pass legislation where defence is able to absorb these cuts in a more flexible way, well, then they can start taking out cuts, say, from R&D and from more acquisitions, rather than needing to put all these civilians out on the street for a month or two.
Nick Cady, you've been sitting here listening to all of this. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it shows really, I mean, to come back to Australia, what an exceptional place Australia's in terms of the Western world, because we're the only country...
So Wayne Swan has a right to be, happy about the state of his budget?
Not in that sense. I mean, in terms of our debate. I mean, we seem to be one of the few countries in the Western world where we seem to be taking the spectre of debt seriously, and there seems to be a political consensus, at least around the idea of coming back into surplus. Whereas in the States, that's completely absent amongst many of the chattering classes. I mean, they seem to think the whole idea of having a surplus is some kind of extreme position. So, it is a terrible problem, and I think the good doctor was right. The mechanism there doesn't help for a smooth and orderly process.
Jackie, Nick has pivoted onto the state of Australia, but he wasn't prepared to park out too much praise there for Wayne Swan. What's your view about the job that Wayne Swan's been doing? He's had a pretty rough couple of weeks, hasn't he?
Well, the bigger question of...
You're allowed to say yes to that.
Well, indeed. But, there's... people are very perplexed about why Australians, especially when you speak with people from overseas, why Australians don't seem to appreciate the state of their economy when we look at the upheaval in the US and the upheaval in Europe. And, it's true when we poll people, they say, there is an awareness that the Australian economy is travelling pretty well, but they certainly don't give the Labor government credit for it. So when we ask who's better to manage the economy, they still say the Liberal Party. So Wayne Swan, certainly has given it his best shot to, convince people of Labor's genius in managing the economy, but unfortunately it's not
working
really
at the
resonating.
moment. But we're going to come to you a little bit later in the program about to what extent it's not working, because Jackie wrote an article today along with Peter Lewis from Essential Media drawing on some of their research findings which suggest, wait for it, perhaps Julia Gillard is a chance of a comeback. Now, I might be verbalizing you a little bit. We'll find out later in the program. James Patterson, I just want to come back to you on this issue of it being a drop in the ocean in the US in relation to the numbers that we're talking about. Do you also consider the size of our debt here in Australia a drop in the ocean compared to the levels of debt overseas?
It's unquestionably the case that Australia is in a much, much better position than the rest of the world, and we should be very thankful for that, as Nick says. But one of the reasons why Australia is in a much better position than the rest of the world is that we have largely had a bipartisan political consensus at the federal level for about the last decade that we should not go into debt unnecessarily, that deficits are not something that should be tolerated. And there's plenty of people out there who say, oh, there's no harm in going into deficit just for this year. Oh, look, there's no harm. We're going to invest it wisely in the national broadband network or whatever. But the reason why Australia is in such a good shape is because we've shown such an intolerance of wasteful spending and excess spending.
When you say we have,
do you
think both sides have, or are you just saying sort of culturally over time?
Oh, I think both political parties are very fearful of running deficits unnecessarily. There's no question that the current federal Labor government would have much preferred to have a budget surplus this year rather than a deficit. And although they haven't delivered one yet, and they may never deliver one, it's certainly something that they've aspired to do.
Rare praise of sorts there coming out of the IPA. Dr. Lockyer, let me come back to US politics for this segment while we can. So do Americans, do you think, I mean, to parlay this to the debt question, do you think that Americans think that their country is in a substantial amount of debt, or is there not an awareness about that?
Oh no, they're fully aware that they're in serious trouble when it comes to the debt.
But they're addicted to the spending, you think, or...?
Yes, this is sort of get your government hands off my Medicare. This is that argument here. But there's disagreement about, well, how do you pay down the debt? Now, the Democrats will say we need more of a balanced approach, we need greater revenue, but we also need to pay down, decrease government spending as well. Whereas Republicans are far more strict when it comes to we need to pay down the debt through decreased government spending. That's it. Government spending is out of control, and if revenue is already at sufficient levels, it's all going to be on cut side rather than revenue side.
All right, stay with us. The good doctor's going to stay with us. We're going to move him out of his comfort zone. No more time on this program to talk about minor issues like the debt problem in the United States. We're going to talk about Rudy Hill and the Prime Minister's 5-night sleepover there. Back in a moment.
Strong women need strong bones. Introducing new Ostelin OsteoGuard. Its powerful combination of 6 key nutrients, including calcium and vitamin D, work together to help keep your bones stronger for longer. Defend your strength with new Ostelin OsteoGuard.
Wonderful, it's marvelous, it's what I love to see. It's wonderful, it's marvelous, that you should care for
me. When you're not in control, it can feel frustrating. With Telstra's 24/7 app, the control's in your hands. Now you can check call and data usage, manage your bills, and even get online support. Telstra's 24/7 app. Just another way we're helping put you in control.
Monopoly Millionaire is here at McDonald's with a 1 in 5 chance to win a share of over $90 million in prizes, like holidays, PlayStation packs, fuel vouchers, and much more. With millions to win, there's never been a better time to play with your food.
So you think that chip won't crack? Luckily Brad called O'Brien before it came to this. Believe me, every chip will eventually crack. And O'Brien repair using our special resin could be as little as 1/3 of the cost of replacing the screen.
O'Brien.
Mazda has put a lot of energy into the all-new Mazda 6. In a world first, every time you brake, a capacitor stores the energy generated, then uses it to save you fuel. And when you accelerate, SkyActiv technology gives sporty performance, saving even more fuel. It's the safest, most advanced Mazda ever. All new Mazda 6. It's driving re-energized.
Our fresher, more radiant skin is hiding just below a layer of dull skin. That's why I use Gamma Hydroxy from Skin Doctors every night. You'll wake up with fresh, glowing, radiant skin every day. With Gamma Hydroxy from Skin Doctors, it's brilliant.
This week at Chemist Warehouse, buy Gamma Hydroxy and receive a free Relaxaderm 15ml. Yes, free Relaxaderm 15ml at Chemist Warehouse this week.
Welcome back. You're watching Showdown, where I'm joined by, take a deep breath, out of Melbourne from the Institute of Public Affairs, James Patterson. Here in the studio with me from Essential Media, Jackie Woods, thanks for your company. And from the Australian, Nick Cater and Troy Bramston. And from the US Studies Centre, Adam Lockyer. I got those all right, didn't I? Perfect. All right. The Prime Minister is in Rudy Hill, but also in Rudy Hill is Mark Butler. Now, Mark Butler had to apologise on his arrival in Rudy Hill because of some remarks that were meant in jest, that weren't taken that way by a lot of people. At the end of the day, they were clearly silly. He acknowledged that. He had a bit of a crack at the name Rudy Hill. I'm not sure what his joke was about, but at any rate, that particular joke landed him in a bit of hot water. He got there, he had to apologise. He did a bit of a street walk, I think, with Ed Husick, one of the local members in Western Sydney, and all was supposed to be forgiven. Now, you'd think you'd be a little bit careful about jokes that could be offensive to the people of Rudy Hill. Let's just take a look at this start to Mark Butler's press conference today.
We're here today to announce a very important milestone in the delivery of the government's Living Longer, Living Better reforms, a $3.7 billion package to modernise Australia's aged care system. I think someone just stole a car. I think it was one of ours too.
Jackie, He seems to be implying that that's the kind of neighbourhood where cars get stolen.
Oh, yes, or just on a long list of awkward moments in press conferences, I think.
We had to churn through 25 seconds to get to that, so let's keep me rolling on this joke. James Patterson, you're from the IPA. You'll probably slam him for that. What's your view?
I'm going to decline the opportunity to put the boot into Mark Butler here.
Oh, come on. I have been told before coming on air that you want to be the next Andrew Bolt. You cannot decline putting the boot in to the Labor Party.
Yeah, well, that's something to aspire to for sure. But but no, Mark Butler. Politicians don't make enough jokes. They take themselves way too seriously. If Mark Butler wants to have a little giggle here or there, I don't think anyone should take offence. I think Australians spend far too much time trying to take offence to things that other people say. We should all learn to have a laugh and let it get along with it.
Troy, you fall right into that category that James is talking about, people taking themselves too seriously. Before we went on air, you were saying that it was inappropriate.
No, I didn't say it was inappropriate, Peter, but I think it was pretty silly and pretty stupid. I mean, the point of it is demonstrated here right now, tonight. We're talking about it. When we should be talking about policy issues or the Prime Minister's, a successful visit to Western Sydney, we're instead talking about a minister who's put his foot in his mouth yet again. And it was, terrible airplay on radio for the government as well. This is a minister who didn't learn from his mistake. He has embarrassed the Prime Minister. Of course, it's a joke. Of course, it's a joke.
I had James from the IPA saying, give Mark Butler a break. We need a little bit more humour in politics. And I've got former Young Labor President Troy Bramston sitting here with me, chastising him for a humourless, offensive joke.
What it's done, Peter, is just distracted from the Prime Minister's visit. And to back up my argument, we're talking about it right here now live on national television. So it was a silly thing to do. You'd think that after he made that mistake last week, he wouldn't repeat it. But lo and behold, like a Labor government does these days, continually repeats its mistakes.
Adam, who needs to talk about a debt position standoff in the United States when you've got the Rudy Hill visit and all the ins and outs of that?
Exactly, and some guy honking a horn, and we're spending time on this. It was funny, and I think we can sort of then move on and start talking about things we need to talk about. But you are right, it is distracting from the policy, but at the end of the day, it was a small, funny joke, and it's not a big deal. It won't hurt Labor at all.
All right, I want to raise the tone of this discussion. Nick Cater, let me bring you in on it. I want to show some more footage of Mark Butler. See if you can pick what is wrong with what is going on in this particular clip. Let's have a look.
I ate a lot of humble pie, I can tell you. They were silly comments. I've apologised for them. I regret them, and I certainly am sorry for any offence that was caused.
Nick Cater, any idea?
I haven't got a clue, but it would be apologise. I don't know. He's in a permanent state of apology.
Well, let me show. We'll show it again without volume. I was intrigued when I saw this. Not a weighty policy issue, but he's only got one dimple. Where has the other dimple gone? No one buying in. All right. Well, we will now move on. We'll move on to some serious issues of politics. Sorry about that. All right. 457 visas. Joe Hockey decided to have a crack at the Prime Minister in relation to her tough stance on 457s by basically dragging a particular individual on a 457 in her office into the discussion. Let's take a look.
Julia Gillard says people on 457 visas are taking the jobs of everyday Australians. Aren't there people in her office on 457 visas? And how did they get security clearance to access some of the most sensitive documents of Australia? If she said, I'm just surprised that there's no one else that is prepared to work in Julia Gillard's office other than someone who's on a 457 visa.
Do you think a 457 should not have access to security clearance?
Well, I'm surprised. I seem to recall that under the previous government, people on 457 visas were not allowed into ministerial offices. But I might be wrong.
Just as a quick aside, one federal member of Parliament sent me a text just then saying Dimplegate in relation to Mark Butler. So we'll see if that catches on. Hashtag Dimplegate. Nick Cater, back to you on the more serious issue. Joe Hockey clearly having a crack at John McTernan, the communications director, who is on a 457 visa, I believe, in the Prime Minister's office. Is it appropriate to bring staff in like that?
Are we banning humour altogether from this program, Peter?
Well, if Troy has his way, we certainly are, because he had a real problem with what Mark Butler had to say.
It was a gag. Hockey had his tongue furling his cheek, and I thought it was quite funny, actually, after all the quite contrived discussion we've had about 457 visas. I thought it was funny. I mean, I don't know. I hate it when we bring in words like appropriate or inappropriate when in the end, people have got to lighten up. We've got to allow a bit of a mirth back into the political debate, haven't we?
Jackie,
I'm not sure it was a joke. I think certainly he was trying to point out some hypocrisy from the government. But I think the point about 457, the point in question is jobs not going to Australians. I'm not sure if there's anyone right now any Australian who would want John McTernan's job at the moment.
I think that's probably a pretty fair point. Troy Bramston, I mean, you do take yourself seriously. What's your view about this issue? The more weighty point behind what Joe Hockey was having to say was the idea that state secrets are on the line and we've got someone on a 457 visa. I'm not sure whether he was joking about that or not. He seemed to imply that that wasn't allowed in his memory under the Howard years. Do you have a view on that?
I think it was just a cheap political shot, really. I mean, I don't think anybody should be bringing staff into political debate. There's a serious debate going on about 457 visas, and yeah, Joe Hockey's had a cheap shot at John McTernan, good on him, but really most people out in there in Voterland are going to say, who the hell is John McTernan?
There's been a lot of profile pieces about him. Are you sure about that?
Well, I just don't think it's at the level of things that people in Australian politics look at. They'll be looking at the policy issues, they'll be looking at the leaders, they're looking at what's on offer for them. I don't think it really makes a lick of difference. The fact that she's got someone in her office or a couple of people in her office on 457 visas. I want to know actually how journalists who used to work for the BBC can come here and work at our Australian newspapers.
Nick, are you on a 457?
Yeah. That was some years ago, actually.
You haven't been here long enough to get rid of that accent.
Years ago. I don't think 457 visas were around when I came out. I had to apply the proper way and apply for citizenship when I got here. So,
listen to the pejorative in that. I came here in the proper way. we all know what you think about 457 visas, whether you mean it or not.
457 visas are really good. I think that they bring flexibility to the workforce. I think they help fill areas of demand. They're good for the economy. They're good for all of us in that sense. So I think the whole contrived argument about whether they take Australian jobs or not, it's rather sort of 19th century from my way of thinking.
Well, I don't think it's really a contrived argument. I think there's a genuine discussion to be had about the number of 457 visas and the way that they're regulated, because certainly, while there's no question that there's a need for skilled labour sometimes, there's also a question about employers' contribution to the economy and whether they're really, to the extent that they could be, investing in training and the skills pipeline, for the next generation of Australian workers. And I think that it does actually feed into a very genuine sense of insecurity that people have about the economy and about the future of jobs. So, I get that the debate is heading down a road that is very shallow and about people taking each other's jobs, but there is a bigger question to be had about, companies and the way that they
So what you're telling us is that Essential Research has done some internal research for the Labor Party that shows that they can do a bit of rabble-rousing if they attack 457.
Well, what I can say is that we regularly poll on the top issues for people in deciding their vote. So the top three, the top one's always managing the economy, and then we move down to health, and then just in our most recent polling in February, moving into number 3 position was Australian jobs and protection of local industries, which was unusual. And compared to that, I think only about 10% of very low-ranking issue was asylum seekers. So I think that territory about jobs actually does, that would suggest it actually is an increasing concern that we've tracked through our polling.
I suspect people are probably conflating asylum seekers with jobs, but who knows?
Absolutely.
I haven't done the research.
No, I agree.
James Patterson, let me bring you in. If you're still with us there, hopefully you've been listening attentively. What's your view on 457? You must have a strong view on that.
Yeah, I think the 457 visa program is a great program. I'd like to see it expanded. It's nothing but economic illiteracy to say that immigrants take jobs. Immigrants do not take jobs. When immigrants come to countries, they expand the economy and create more jobs. There is nothing worse for an economy than not being able to welcome great numbers of immigrants. Milton Friedman had a fantastic phrase, which was that he was in favour of tax cuts at any time for any reason. Well, I'm in favour, I agree with that, but I'm also in favour of immigration at any time for any reason. A big Australia would be a great thing.
We seem to have had an audio problem with Troy. He can't hear what you had to say there. No loss, just kidding. Everybody else, I think, did, though, at the same time. I want to play another clip, if I can. We've got some footage here. During the week, I should say, by way of background, we had a situation last week where Scott Morrison was dragged over the coals to some extent for some remarks that he made in relation to refugees and people being informed in the area that they move into. There was a debate about whether he was verbaled or whether what he said was in fact coalition policy and worthy of discussion. Both George Brandis and Joe Hockey were asked whether they supported Scott Morrison's position. And I tell you what, they weren't backwards in coming forward. Let's have a listen.
I haven't had a discussion with Mr Morrison about this particular matter, and when I do, and when the Shadow Cabinet next meets, no doubt that matter will be addressed.
Well, I mean, you know, that's an issue for debate, but, you know, my personal view in this instance doesn't matter.
Nick Cater, with friends like that, who needs enemies? I mean, they were hardly rushing to defend their colleague, Shadow Cabinet, fellow mate, Scott Morrison.
Well, I think you can take it that it's not going to get up as a policy, but I don't think it was meant as that. I think it was, you know...
Thought bubble gone wrong.
Yeah, I think that's about it. And I think he would have been much safer if he'd kept to the much safer ground, which is, you know, the one thing that's sort of undeniable is this is a government with a policy that's just out of control. And if we stick to that side of things, I mean, I mean, I'm sure all of us are equally appalled to see the conditions in which people, some of these I'm not allowed to say these people, am I? But the conditions under which the asylum seekers have been led into the community are living, you know, sleeping on the floors of worn-out office buildings in Parramatta. I mean, that's not the Australian way, and I think all of us can unite in saying they've got to fix that policy.
Yeah, no, the Australian way is to make sure that they get stuck in worse squalor at home by putting up the borders. But, Troy, what's your view on this?
Well, I think that if you're in the trenches, the last thing you'd want is to rely on Bishop or Hockey or Brandis to go over the top with you.
Bishop, give her a break. She didn't even jump in there.
No,
I mean, there were footage of Brandis.
Bishop did on Q&A last night, Peter, if you were watching, that Bishop was very lukewarm about this idea.
Well, we're not all ABC lovers,
Well,
Troy.
this is the problem. Well, I turned over, actually, after watching Paul Murray, which is a higher-rating show than this one. But anyway, listen, every single night he beats you, Peter. But anyway, look, the issue here is that with Scott Morrison is that he overcooks it. You know, he has a strong political argument about the government's handling of refugee policy, but he overcooks it. He always goes that little bit too far. It's always a bit of a dog whistle. It's always a bit of racism in there, and that's exactly what he's done with this.
Troy, your boss next to you is shaking his head.
It's not a dog whistle and it's not racism. And Scott Morrison would be delighted every time we play that clip on television because his view is much closer to where the majority of people stand in this country than us amongst the chattering classes. I'm afraid we're just out.
Jackie, you're confusing me. You're nodding with what Nick's saying, that Scott Morrison would be happy with the clip being played, but earlier you were telling us that refugees is a low-order political issue for people.
It's true. It's not a vote changer. But it's not to say, I mean, I agree that, you know, Scott gets an enormous amount of attention when he says these things, and I mean, that's really, I mean, he's not really out to get a serious policy up, is he? He's out to sort of get it out there. And I mean, certainly people do, you know, in the public have, you know, quite sort of contradictory and sometimes quite strong views about issues related to boat people and asylum seekers that, you know, sometimes people try to exploit. That's not to say it's actually going to sway their vote.
Adam, you've been sitting here listening to this domestic discussion. Now, what's your view?
So my view is this is a way for the Liberals to have it both ways. They can come out with Scott Morrison and say something which I think was largely an accident, but it's out there now, saying that...
But it doesn't sound like Shadow Cabinet are going to endorse it, no, certainly not if Hockey has anything to do with it or Brandis.
That's the way they can have it both ways. They can come out and Scott Morrison can say these things, then all his colleagues can say, well, we're going to distance ourselves from that. But the people who agree with it will say, well, the Liberal Party largely agrees with this view, but they can't actually come out and say this.
So your point is they sound the dog whistle, but then they retreat so that they don't upset people that would be concerned about that
so they can
follow-through.
They can have both ways.
Thoughts?
I think the issue here, Peter, was the behavioural protocols. What actually are they? How would they work?
Behavioural protocols? I thought you were talking about when Scott Morrison's allowed to speak.
How are behavioural protocols tracking on essential media? Are people concerned about those?
Some things we're too scared to ask.
Yeah, it was just not a really well thought through idea, and there were better lines of attack here, which was about how the government is managing immigration and refugee policy, what are the circumstances in which refugees are living, but also if you were a parent who had your students at Macquarie University, not far from here, living in those dormitories, how would you feel about knowing that there were refugees there who didn't have jobs and, you know, no one else knew what they were doing, what they were up to?
And I think that goes back to the very point that Nick was making. You've come around, Troy. The point that, you know, at the end of the day, if you, I hope I'm not verbling you here, rabble-rouse in that direction, when people put themselves in that position, they have a sympathy for the sort of line that Morrison is running. But nonetheless, I still think that it's a dangerous, slippery slope.
We have to separate out from here immigration policy from immigration politics. And this is more immigration politics than policy.
A learned way to end the segment. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have a little bit of look at Jackie's research. She thinks, and I know I'm verbally in her now, that Julia Gillard can win this election. Back in a moment.
Sitting beside you in school, while paint I'd make you laugh. Mine was never very good. Yours looked exactly like the photograph. Looks like I'm growing up beside you.
Supercoat, tailored nutrition for every life stage.
I'm growing up beside you.
It's wonderful, it's marvelous, it's what I love to see. It's wonderful, it's marvelous, that you should care for me.
Not all mobile networks are created equal. Telstra delivers where other networks don't. Delivering greater coverage. Delivering greater reliability. And delivering faster speeds in more places. So get on the Telstra mobile network with a Nokia Lumia 920 for $5 per month on a $60 Everyday Connect plan. The network without equal.
Getting enough calcium into your day isn't always easy. Until now. Introducing new Uncle Toby's Plus Calcium. Together with milk, it gives you more than 40% of your daily calcium. And with linseed fibre, poppy seed puffs, sliced almonds and pepita seeds, it tastes delicious. Kickstart your calcium at breakfast with new Uncle Toby's Plus Calcium. More than 40% of your daily calcium.
Welcome to comparethemarket.com.au, where we love to compare. We compare a range of insurance: health insurance, car insurance, travel insurance, and life insurance, so you can easily find a good deal for you. Too easy. Start comparing today at comparethemarket.com.au. Cue the jingle.
The Prime Minister isn't the only one presiding over a minority government. Colin Barnett's Liberal Party actually holds fewer seats than Labor. This weekend he's hoping to change that in a bid to govern in his own right.
Our record is a good record.
Mr Barnett is the front runner, but will Labor put up a fight?
Friends, I'm ready.
How much is Julia Gillard's unpopularity affecting Mark McGowan's chances? Live will have complete coverage of the WA election result on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching Showdown. Now, we're going to start this discussion by talking to James Patterson out of Melbourne. I just feel sorry for you, James, all there by yourself. You're like the lonely kid in the playground that no one wants to talk to. So let me bring you in. Let me let you know that, not personally, I don't mean. Let me let you know that Troy Bramston, we've fixed the technical problem. It was a really serious one. He had turned the volume down to 0. So we've put that up. Experienced TV practitioner that he is, he can now hear you. Let me start by asking you, do you think that there is much chance, if any, that Julia Gillard can win the next election?
Oh, we should never say never in politics. We can never predict really with certainty or much
sit on any more
confidence
fences?
what will come up. But I think it's fairly likely that the coalition will win the next election and probably pretty comfortably.
Okay, that's what you say. But Jackie Woods from Essential Media, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've done some research and you think that there is a very good chance that Julia Gillard could come barnstorming back and win the election.
Well, I will have to correct you there. I don't know I'd be doing much for the brand of Essential Research if I, went early and called the election for Julia Gillard tonight. But, certainly we asked questions this week about, how firmly people's minds were made up about the election. And what we found is actually that over half of people say that they either haven't made up their mind or they're leaning one way but they might still change it. And that rises dramatically for young people. So we've got 2/3 of people under 35 who say that they still to, really make up their mind about who they're going to vote for on September 14.
But can I just jump in and ask you a question? Because I had a read through it before we came on air, and it was published on the Drums website, as much as I am loath to give them a free advertisement. The facts, though, are these, aren't they? That it's one thing when you look at the overall numbers for Julia Gillard and the Labor Party to come back from being behind 55-45 or thereabouts and get back to 50-50 or win 51-49. If you're talking about only half the population that you have to try to win over, to win that half around, she has to actually turn around a 45-55 rating to 55-45. The size of the turnaround, once you compartmentalise only about half the voters, makes it nigh impossible, doesn't it?
Look, I think the point of our article today wasn't necessarily to say that, what the election result would be. Really, the point is to say that actually the people who are probably going to decide this election probably haven't made up their minds yet, and that's
always the case, though, isn't it? Like, at the end of the day, that's what politicians are fearful of. John Hewson should have been fearful of it, and he wasn't. He put out a grab bag of significant policies and ended up losing because Paul Keating tore them apart. Tony Abbott's not making that mistake.
But I think, the commentary around the election has certainly been of the nature that, things are a foregone conclusion, to the extent that they are.
Yeah, you bagged all of those of us that are saying that. People like me. You had a red hot crack at us in the article that we're over the top in what we say.
It's a cautionary note that, there's still plenty of people in play in this election, and we shouldn't, probably forget about them.
Troy Bramston, Jackie's attacks were every bit as much directed at you as they were at me.
No, I've actually always said that that you can't rule the government out being re-elected. I mean, that would just be foolish.
You can't rule it out.
You can't rule it out.
There's a lot of room in between ruling it out versus saying that they're likely to win. I mean, not that you're saying that.
Absolutely. The polling evidence since the end of 2010 has been entrenched, virtually every single one of them, against the government, making it very, very difficult to think the government would be re-elected. But the interesting thing about that polling is, of course, most voters, or a large proportion of voters, maybe 20-30% or so, don't traditionally make up their mind until an election campaign is called, and that is often the last refuge of a party behind. They think that that in those final weeks they can turn enough people around and they can win that election. But the reality is even though maybe 20 or 30% make up their mind in the last week or the last month, that doesn't mean they've forgotten every single thing that's happened over the previous 3 years. So everything that's gone on is still factoring up in their mind before they actually make a decision. So even though a poll like that may give some heart to Labor, I think it's a faint one at that.
Nick Cato, I want to ask you this question. Now, you've just finished writing a book, or about to finish writing a book about the Australian way of life, the Australian political culture. Yeah. You've had a look back over decades. Yeah. Is there a time at state or federal level that you can think of, and if you need some thinking time, we'll move on and come back to you, where a government has come back from a more dire situation than the current Gillard government looks like it's in politically?
I can't see it. I mean, and the reason is this, that whenever we talk about people that come back at the last minute, the last 6 months or so of an election, they didn't start from as poor a position as Julia Gillard. So she's line ball at the end of the 2010 election. She's got to gain ground. There's no room for error. She can't lose a seat or two. So that's where she's at. If you're going to talk about historical circumstances, I think the real danger for Gillard is that, having been unpopular to very unpopular, she's now in danger of going into the laughingstock territory, the sort of place we last saw probably Billy McMahon in before the 72 election. And I think once you're in that zone, you're probably no way of coming back whatsoever.
Troy was nodding furiously there, but I'm going to move over to Adam. There's a segue to US politics here, because a lot of people on the Labor side of the political divide, if you like, and Jack, I want to ask you about this in a moment as well, have talked about embracing Obama-style campaign tactics as a way of Labor pulling itself out of the position that it's in. Paul Howes did it at his AWU conference. What's your view on that?
Oh, you see them moving that way, so moving towards more grassroots campaigning style. Now, that works very well in the American system, where you're largely appealing to your base, where you need to mobilise your base to come out and vote for you in the first place. Now, in Australia, we have compulsory voting. It means it's very different, where the grassroots campaigning may not work as well.
So you think compulsory voting makes it harder to pull yourself out of an electoral hole? Would you say that?
It does, because you're all chasing after the median voter. You're after the average guy. So you can largely take your base for granted, which both sides have, and now Labor's struggling with that because the Greens are now taking into the far left of their base.
Although they've just recently broken up the alliance, and under compulsory preferencing, they'll get those people back, even though they can now move to the centre.
They're still trying to distinguish both their brands so that the Greens can try and shore up that left, which the Labor has been taken for granted for years now. And so what both sides are trying to go after that medium voter. That's why our campaigns are so boring these days, because they're going to these same suburbs and spilling the same policies.
And we've seen both leaders doing it this week in Rooty Hill. Let me ask you about it, Jackie. Let me ask you about this particular aspect of it. Social media campaigning and the kind of Obama-style campaign that is being mooted to be embraced by the Labor Party here. Is that really the kind of campaign that's going to tap into the mainstream swinging voter, do you think?
Well, I'm always a little bit unclear when people say Obama-style campaigning.
What does it even mean?
There are a couple of things in play. And one's, one's actually quite sort of scientific, like a lot of new techniques about how to identify, and particularly these kind of soft and, there's soft voters and, a lot of modelling done on how they're going to vote and how we can reach them. And then, I think the other part is that real sort of person-to-person,
the old-fashioned
networking model. And, people can use, social media is a tool, I suppose, to be able to reach those people, but essentially, it's still person-to-person contact, and it's that idea that you're more likely to change your vote if someone that you know influences you rather than, watching a politician on TV at a press conference in Rooty Hill. I think the term's possibly a little bit overblown sometimes, and I can't actually remember what the question was originally.
That's right. No, you kind of answered it on the way through. We are almost out of time, so James Patterson, the IPA, likes to always have the last word on things. What is your last word for this show?
Well, if a political party is talking about innovative international campaign techniques, they're in real trouble. They should be talking about policy and what they're delivering for the Australian people. Oh, you've got to expand on that. There were 60 seconds on program and you've just wound up early. You've just lost your last say. Finally, anything that we're expecting next week? I mean, I believe that Newspoll is due next week. It is, yes. Julia Gillard will therefore be under pressure as Parliament resumes. Any talk of a Rudd comeback? That seems to be something you're always spruiking. Troy, quick thought?
Actually, the opposite, Peter. Last Monday I wrote that I thought it was very unlikely Rudd would come back, because why would he want to come back? Only likely to lead Labor to defeat Julia Gillard, and Wayne just want to get off the hook and his legacy is tarnished. So, very difficult thing there, but you can never ever rule out...
If the poll's bad enough, you never know.
That's right. A party's survival instinct could kick in, and you can never rule out a Rudd come back any time between now and the election.
All right, we are now right out of time. One and all here in Sydney, thanks very much for your company. And to you, James Patterson, putting up with the jokes about you being isolated there in Melbourne, thanks for your company as well. We appreciate that. And thank you for watching. I'll be back on Friday with Contrarian. See you then.